Once again, welcome. This is just going to be another great day. I'm with Sundberg-Ferar. I think we all know that as such, but it's not just me. We have an entire team standing behind me. They're not here right now. We are not in the group. They're all at their basements and kitchens. But whatever I am, whatever we are, whatever I would say the processes or the methodology that we are stating, I'm learning them from all my team. So it's kind of an team standing here. Literally behind me, no, behind me just a whiteboard. By the way, this is my house still. I just had a whiteboard for our webinar as such. So one thing is amazing means Kurt took this photograph and did this a few years ago. Commerce is our let's say township where we are, and welcome to the new normal. How amazingly true it is right now. No matter what, we all hope this would be temporary, but it would still leave some traces of change of behavior and patterns as we are going forward. So what might be that new normal, what should not be that new normal, would eventually come out and eventually evolve out, hopefully in a few weeks or a few months as we go it. So I think everybody knows. I will not introduce our studio again as such, but since last 86 years, from there till today, we've been designing products, services, and the elements that go beyond it. Both of them come hand in hand, and there are a range of different things, right? Means as a studio can do design, innovation strategy. Actually, we will hear more about our innovation strategy at the later in the end of the day when Dave would take the stage. But there are amalgamation of facts that go and make your product successful as such. And the reason is where we are. That's why we are over here today. Day one was really good. We had hundreds, literally, of participants all around the nation and international too. And we went through strategy, marketing, mobility, and information architecture. And today we have an amazing, equally strong panel: branding, the franchisee business, design and cities, and then innovation strategy as such too. So it's going to be an exciting day. I'm looking forward to having conversations with all four of these distinguished speakers, and try to see how we can create some tie-ins as possible. Yesterday, this board was completely full with notes. Today, I intend to do the same thing and try to see how we can build up on each other as we go forward as such too. So I think before we start anything, let me again present very succinctly and beautifully and understand what makes your business or your product. Product can be an object, can be a service, can be a website, how it can make successful. We touched upon that yesterday too. We are an industrial design studio. Yeah, we understand design is a pretty important part of it, but we still understand there are so many other factors that make your business successful. And that's why we have most of our partners over here together to expound and then thought of what they bring to the table. It's a real collaborative table as such. And we can talk more about specifically what design would be. But yesterday we got some answers that we could not find time to answer. One of them was like, when you say, let's say, innovation, where does in the entire hierarchy of innovation does design or industrial design sit? So let me take a few minutes to try to just explain in a nutshell how we think is the entire scope of the world of innovation, right? There might be many other elements too, but right now there might be five main factions of how innovation is literally attained. The first one is very straightforward and simple: the evolutionary kind of an perspective of how we learn, right? A farmer learns from his father. He learns from his father what are the typical season cycles, when to plant the seeds, when to harvest. All those things is really good, but the problem is it is really slow. It is painstakingly slow of how you listen from them and how you take it to the next element as such too. So it is good, it's happening, it will always happen, but it takes time. The second one typically would be the accidental kind of an innovation. We always have heard about it. And when I say innovation slash invention also, accidental might be the classic case of post-it notes or penicillin, where you are trying to go and solve a problem. The accidents do not happen when you are doing cooking and you find something else in the world of recreation. It can happen too. But the thing is, you're still trying, you're putting best of your minds over there, and somehow accidents happen, and that also leads to an amazing innovation pathway as such too. The third would be typically, I would say, I'm going to call it the mind of geniuses, right? We always attest to, let's say, Henry Ford or Steve Jobs or Hans Sperling. Those are some amazing I would say, individuals who can literally harness that kind of and multiple point of views right at the same time. So there are people like that who do this, and it happens as such. But it's if you have your CEO or your president who would reflect somebody like that, then you might not need, let's say, innovation studio, a studio like us as such too, or your internal design studio too. The fourth one is happenstance. Somehow, all the planets align. Like you might have a booming economy, some of your experiments are working out. You might have a amazing, fearless leader, or it just happens to be their passion point. There might be many examples like this too. Let's say Patagonia, the owners or the very passionate users of their apparatus, and they saw something, let's say, missing in the market, and they started to do things on their own. Everything else aligned for them to be a brand completely over here. But the thing is, it may or may not be repeatable, or it may not be copied into a framework where you can start to go to the next one. And that's why the thing is, when we want to have a repeatability and understanding and gleaning of what needs to happen, then it goes to a structured way of innovation. And that's where the industrial design thinking sits. Apart from the other elements can work. Again, there are exceptions to every rule. The evolutionary work can work great in one industry, maybe not for others. But to make sure we cannot waste time. Nowadays we cannot waste even smaller amounts of budgets also nowadays. How to make sure you have those kind of a methodology, those approach, those ethos of what and to do or how to do, I would say, an innovation kind of a process, this comes to place. And that's the way of industrial design. It can be your own internal design studio or an external design studio for hire that can come in for a few months or sometimes a few weeks or sometimes a few years, and take it to the next level. And eventually, as we are going through, we will see how most of this might come into play. One of the element is, if you look, industrial design is it's never linear. It seems so linear over here, but it's all about understanding what's happening in the ecosystem, what's happening in the trends area, trends of everything, the industry, the market, the materials, manufacturing, all those things come together. And we can eventually, if you want, we can talk about it later too. But that's the entire element of how I would say the things happen in the world of, I would say, just industrial design in the context of the entire world of what needs to happen from strategy or branding, or other elements too. So talking about that, coming back to our, let's say, the first speaker as such, and Drew, you may want to, let's say, have your video on and your mics on. I see you're already there as such, and welcome. Welcome to our virtual conference day two. You're our, let's say, introducing the first one keynote speaker as such. So we're looking forward to get some understanding from you, from your world. But before we start that and we jump into the world of branding, can you take some moment to tell a little bit more about you? I've been asking people about, means we have read your bio. Hopefully everybody has read that bio. But tell us something about you, about your personality. What do you do for fun? What, where do you go and seek inspiration?
Yeah, thanks, Vivek. I'm excited to be here. You put together a great conference and a great panel. So glad to be a part of it. Appreciate that. I'm Drew Patrick, the CEO and owner of Skidmore Studio. For those of you I don't know, we are a small but mighty branding studio in Detroit. We've been around for 60 years, doing different iterations of creative work in the Detroit community and around the country. And our most recent iteration is helping good organizations be their best through brand strategy and design. So that is our company. Me personally, do lots of stuff. I'm in my music room right now, sunroom. So everybody working from home, you can see maybe guitar and piano in the back. I don't play either of them well, but I really enjoy them and get inspiration from at least attempting to play some instruments and music.
Hey, maybe do at the end of the session, we might have you do something. If you want, you can. We have a captive audience right here.
That's a terrible idea.
Okay.
If you want everybody to exit the conference, I'm happy to do that at 4 o'clock. I can start playing, and I'm sure we'll get everybody cleared out.
No, go ahead. Sorry, you're saying something more about yourself.
Oh no, I don't know. Things I do for fun. Love to travel. Love to just meet interesting people and do interesting things. I'm active skiing, diving, hiking, biking, all those things. I've run a few marathons and recently got into woodworking too. So I'm a amateur, very amateur woodworker there, but did a little project with a couple people at my studio where we built out a restaurant type booth for one of our small conference rooms in our new space. So it was a fun, really feeling real ownership over the physical space we were in by building some of it out ourselves.
That's interesting. That's amazing. I didn't know about running. I thought I knew about the musical facet of you, but running is good. I try to indulge myself into OCR, the obstacle course running, and one day we should aim to run together. Means I just have again. I just have pulled your website up there, and it says a serious branding, and I want to have plenty of questions already. But can you take a moment to just let us understand? It's a very simple question. What is brand, and how do you try to wrap your mind about a brand rather than about what you are doing? Can you tell about the fundamental elements of how to approach the word brand to understand it?
Yeah, for sure. Most people, when you say the word brand, they think logo or tagline, right? They say, oh, that's our brand. We need a new brand, which they're saying we need a new logo. And while that's a really important component of a strong brand, certainly not all of it. And we would define your brand as the outside world's perception of who you are as an organization. And that is what you do, what you stand for, and who you are. Now, the components that make up that brand, we always talk about the 4 Ps. So again, logo, tagline, public face, what we say out into the market, that is one of the 4 Ps, your public face or your promises. But behind that, you've got your people, your process, and your product, right? And all 3 of those things, the reality of what you're doing for your consumers or for your outside constituents is really what makes up the bulk of the brand. Your messaging out into the world and your identity is just or should be, just the authentic reflection of all those things behind it.
That's so pretty interesting. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, we always talk about brand and operations really need to be aligned. So when companies or organizations start talking about branding, our first step is really understanding them internally in their organization and what they're actually doing. It is a story you're telling, but that story has to be authentic and real.
And that story has to be a very good ending also. But when you say, is there a definition of a brand, or does that change from category to category? Again, I hate the world of defining something accurately. But how should I ask that? When you say brand, is right now, have you defined those 4 Ps? Are they different or same or similar for a product or for a service or for a digital entity?
Yeah, I would say that they are, the categories are the same regardless, right? So people are your people, the people that make up your organization. And when we say product, that could be the product or service that you provide out into the marketplace. And your process is really all of the business processes that you have internally to connect your people and your product to the outside world. So people, product, and process, every business has those things. And then your public face is the message and identity you put out into the world that should accurately reflect those 3 categories behind it. So whether you're an IT company, SaaS software, or product manufacturer, you've still got people, product, or service and process that you're trying to build your story around so that the public really understands who you are and what you stand for.
So how do you unearth those authenticity? Means what is the typical way you engage? Means you depend on the clients to tell you what they think they're doing, because the operative word you used was outside word expression. So if we are going to try to see what happens inside, that's what you want to reflect in your messaging. But then how would that translate to the outside world expression?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, we start with human-centered design, right? That mentality of design thinking, like I know you all practice as well, but really starting from a human-centered perspective. So in any engagement that involves branding, which is most of what we do, we start with discovery, and that's discovery being human-centric, meaning who are the real people that are, one, inside your organization, and two, the constituents that are outside your organization that are relevant to who your brand is. And that could be vendors, stakeholders, and obviously your consumers or customers. So we really want to get a firsthand understanding of the people that are involved with your organization. We say involved, that means internally and externally.
So do you literally have your teams go in those client companies and try to literally investigate that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, discovery scope of a project can vary depending on what the project is and what the goals are. But ultimately, you're going to do things like one-on-one interviews, group interviews, observation, survey. Those ways to get primary research, firsthand understanding of the real people that are involved.
And I now have this is a kind of a different perspective on it. There might be a client where they are doing right now what they think they are doing good, or they have their setup innovation culture. Everybody wants to learn and grow. So what they might be thinking is they want to go to their intended state of how ideally they want to be presented. So authentically, I think a team like you should be trying to capture, or your intention would to capture what they're doing right now, or do you also try to see how they are going to translate to the a desired state they want to be, right? Means ideally, I also am always thinking of answering things in an ideal state, right? Means, yeah, did I run today? Like, no, but I know I'm going to run today as such, but right now I have not. So how do you try to balance between their current state, which is the authentic state, versus their desired, I would say, ideal user experiential state, if
Yeah,
any?
we absolutely talk about aspirational branding, but it can't be false branding, right? So it is a fine line to walk, Jivak, like you described. We want, and again, our purpose as a branding entity is to help good organizations be their best. So let's talk about what that is. Let's describe and paint a vivid and clear picture about what your best organization looks like. And then we can brand for that, both from an identity and a messaging standpoint. But you have to back it up, because really all your brand is, and this is where we get back to the definition of brand. And the definition of brand is the perception of who you are and what you stand for, at least the definition we use, who you are, what you stand for. So that perception is going to come from people's real experiences with your brand. It may start, if you don't have any awareness, with the messaging you're putting out into the world, but ultimately it's going to fall back on what somebody's real experience was. So if that experience, if you're painting an aspirational picture in an ideal future state, and you're not actually actively paying that off or working to pay it off, your branding's going to fail, right?
Yeah.
So it has to be backed up by reality, but that's not to say you need to describe all of your faults and scars within your branding story.
Yeah. And we also have I would say, I was not saying an obstacle, but we have to make sure that we address that of when we, and you, I would like to understand, when I say we in the product design world, I'd like to see how you in the branding world would do that. When you try to go and uncover these elements, does it happen that there might be different stakeholders in the same client who might have a different perspective of where they want to be? And let's say the C-level suite 1A, B, C, they have a different kind of an ideal future state. Do you become the mediators to bring them together, or how do you come across this problem at all?
Oh, absolutely. Oftentimes, when we're talking about brand engagements, whether it's branding of a new entity or division, or rebranding of a company, or oftentimes we're branding a new product or service. All those things generally make their way pretty high up in organizations. So you've got strong personalities, usually people who have a lot of history with the organization that we're working with, strong opinions that aren't always aligned. So we do have to play a bit of a facilitator role. And that is, we try to fall back on the process, right? It is not personal. There's no individual. We always push people back to what's best for the organization, not what's best for any individual or department. So from a branding perspective, strategy sessions and brainstorm sessions often involve, we'll say, disagreement or misalignment by stakeholders. And it is our role to help them get aligned, but it doesn't always happen in the room, that's for sure.
Yeah, we hope that will be the case. But you mentioned about the disagreement, and I think it will be impossible in a way to have an 100% consensus or with something. But typically, is there any, not that there might be a single way, but are you pretty successful in resolving the disagreement as an external consultancy? Would that actually help them more? Or because I think, as you said, consultants like you and us, we come there with a methodology, with a process, with an experience of 80 years or 60 years as such. And does that help about bringing some kind of an already trained, solid framework to the table for them to say like, yes, I believe, I have confidence in what Drew and his team is telling, and that's why I need to adjust or recalibrate what I think? Does that happen, or what makes it happen?
I'd say almost without fail, we're able to facilitate at least alignment on how to move forward, right? And that's our role. We are strategists and facilitators for our clients. So the process that we go through, we're clear about our design thinking process and our process to get clients from a starting point to a finish point. And I tell you, it's really influential when you start talking about, if we can't get to a point where we move forward, either this is on hold or budgets and timelines increase. That usually motivates clients to start finding a way internally to get to a point of alignment. And that's really all we're trying to do, is say, there may never be a perfect answer when you're talking about a brand, because it's subjective, right? But we need to get to a point where we agree that it's authentic and it's compelling and we can move forward. So that may be on a logo decision, it may be on a tagline decision, it may be on a brand positioning statement decision. All of those points in time are points in time where you're likely to have internal stakeholder disagreement to some level. And we say disagreement's healthy, right? You don't get like you were talking about earlier, innovation or improvement without having some friction. And we talk about healthy conflict a ton. There should be healthy conflict between internal stakeholders, and there should be, as long as we address it up front and we don't violate any of our values in doing so, there should be healthy conflict between us and our clients. It's our job to push you further than you would go on your own, right?
That's pretty interesting. And this might be my ignorance as such, but when you say about brand positioning or logo or tagline, somehow are these the same nomenclature used by the marketing team? And if they are using it, how do you differentiate branding with marketing, and how do they work in unison, or is there some boundary? Or help us understand brand and marketing from their perspectives.
Yeah, good distinction. We definitely recognize, while there's overlap, there's a delineation between branding and marketing, right? So branding really is your position in the world as to why you exist and why people should care. It is your reasons to believe. We'll talk about RTBs to make it simple, right? Brand, your brand, is your reasons to believe. And branding is the act of developing and communicating that in the best way possible. Marketing, on the other hand, the way we would look at it is from an same acronym, RTB, reasons to buy. Marketing is about getting people to take action. And while those things work together, and when they're done best, they work together as seamlessly as possible, they are different, and they have a different motivation, and they're addressing consumers who are really in a different mindset or a different place within a purchasing funnel. So reasons to believe come out more often when you're trying to make people aware that you exist, more top of funnel marketing activities. And marketing tactics tend to come out more when people are further along the funnel and you're trying to get them to take an action, sign up, purchase, whatever it is that your organization is looking for them to do. And there's actually really great research out there that we subscribe to that says data will show that there is a pretty precise split in how you should split your messaging out into the world to optimize your communications with your consumers and stakeholders. And that's a 60-40 split, to say 60% of your messaging out in the world should really focus on your brand messages, and 40% should focus on marketing or activation messages. So 60% of what you put out there should not be asking people to make a purchase.
Then what should it be about your reasons to believe, right? Means,
yeah, this is who we are.
can you give an example? Means maybe some of our audience would love to have, if you have a case study or an example where, because that's a pretty important element. About 60-40 is a pretty, 60% is huge. I am enjoying that. But yeah, any analogy might help.
Yeah, everybody's favorite two examples when it comes to brand and marketing. You just take a quick look at Apple and Nike, because they obviously do things very well. Have people that are much smarter than me who are in charge there, and pay attention to advertisements from those two companies and how often they're promoting the lifestyle or the community that they have engaged in their brand, versus how often they're saying, purchase this product for $149. And they're absolutely going to do both, because you have to do both. But a lot of companies, even sophisticated and larger companies, tend to lean way more into the activation side of things, where it's just, here's an offer, here's an offer, here's an offer, here's a sale, here's an offer. And especially now, audiences really tend to get turned off by that. So we're regularly encouraging our clients to focus on your brand, make sure those foundations are built, practice branding before marketing. It's not that branding is more important, it's that it really should be established and done first before you start asking people to buy. I mean, Jivak, think about it. If I didn't know you and I came to you and said, hey man, I got something to sell, you want it? What's the chances you're gonna engage in that? Versus, we've built a relationship over a year, you trust me, you know me, you think I'm a decent guy, and then I say, hey, by the way, I've got this service I'm offering, what do you think? Which do you think is a more likely scenario where you're gonna pull the trigger?
Yeah, absolutely. Means I think the answer is clear. It's nice to have the familiarity. It's nice to have the approachability and understanding. I would say the individual first. If somebody like you is approaching versus just sell. So I'm completely over there. I'm just trying to means we have a couple of questions also coming in. I'm trying to make sure that we are trying to reach out to the entire audience. So our audience actually is made up of right now big enterprise people, clients. We have medium-sized companies, and we have startups also. And I know, just like you and me, we have few consultants too. So I completely understand what you're saying, 60-40 as such. But in the world of consultancy, maybe small studio consultancy, would that also hold true?
Oh, absolutely. I would say that's not something that's unique to larger entities or entities with large marketing budgets. It's certainly easier to manage and measure when you're doing it through, marketing spend, and you can really attribute, okay, this campaign that we're going to spend X dollars on is going to be focused on brand messaging, reasons to believe, and this campaign's going to focus on marketing activation, reasons to buy, and we're going to allocate 60% of the budget to the first one and 40 to the second. Super easy to make sure that that happens when you're doing that through paid advertising. But oftentimes smaller startup entities, more grassroots entities, you don't have that same level of measurement, but it's really still just as important, if not more so, to make sure you're putting your brand messaging out into the world when you're getting started and people don't know who you are. It's like we mentioned before, brand messaging is most important when people don't know who you are. You want to build awareness through trust building and reasons to believe in why you exist. You don't want to build awareness through I've got something on sale, buy from me, because then you're just known as somebody that's trying to push a product or a service. So I'd say for smaller entities, it's not that you want to skew from 60-40, it's that you really just don't want to forget about the 60, because it's easy to do that when you're trying to get up and running and have some revenue in the door.
That makes sense. So before that, you asked me the question, if you would come selling something and I would come selling something, I think people will come and buy from you. You're more handsome than what I can present. So you already have that working from you, and your debonair personality is there. I cannot match that. So
no,
over there, I would miserably fail.
Though. You look professional. You're wearing a coat. I'm a slob. I'm just wearing a sweater and a t-shirt.
That's why I have to accessorize myself. I cannot be as confident as you. Like, yeah, things will happen. But what the point you mentioned is pretty interesting. So we also work with a decent level of startups. So when I say startups, they are still not completely inventor. They have gone a little bit beyond in the world of raising money as such. If not stage A or stage B, the first seed kind of funding is there. So from that perspective of startups, should they grapple with the understanding of a brand? Because at that time, why they are doing it, because they have seen some pain, some need, some want, some desire in where it is lacking, right? And that's why they're responding to it with their idea or a solution. So at that time, they are a little bit more focused on the, let's say, problem solving. How eventually we know people like this eventually become a big brand. History always tells us, like, almost all of the big brands started in a garage or somewhere on a mountain hike or something else. But at that time, now since there is a pretty good, let's say, virtual learning or learning across and understanding what the value of brand is, how would a startup think about his problem solving along with this kind of an cloud at all, with a silver shining over it, about how to use brand in that? How should they grapple with it?
Yeah, I think there's two really common mistakes from entities that are starting up. Whether it's a product or a service, I don't think it matters much. We see it with both. We work with a lot of emerging food brands, we'll say. So they've got a food product that they're either selling direct or selling through grocery retail. And what we really see most often is that while they're really great at defining the attributes and benefits of their product, they don't always identify and get really clear about the audience that those are right for, and focusing on a narrow audience. Okay, so I mean, you ask anybody, most common answer when we ask our customers, who is your client? They say, well, everybody. And while we all want that to be true and we all want to be Coke, even Coca-Cola doesn't consider the entire world. If you're behind the doors in their marketing room, they're not going to define their ideal consumer as everybody. They're going to have targets, and they're going to have campaigns that are targeted to specific consumer segments. And so in the startup world, really think about positioning your product or service for a specific and narrow consumer segment, and define that segment not only through demographic information, which is most common, but really through behavioral identifiers, so psychographic information. And you can start to build segments through what are the other things that people buy or look for, and then you can start applying that to where do we find them. So we're great advocates for not only human-centered design, but really focusing in on your consumer and getting really narrow on who your ideal consumer is. Because what that does from our perspective is helps you get really clear in what your messaging is. And if you're really clear, then that messaging is gonna radiate outside of that very narrow audience, right? So if I'm speaking to you and you're my target, and I am just laser sharp focused, and this is what I have and why it's great for you and why it's going to benefit you and why you're the right person. People who are on the fringe of being the right people for your product or service are going to hear that message, right? Because it's clear and it's compelling to you. So I say, get really clear on who your audience is. And then on the positioning side, when we talk about brand positioning, it's this is what I do, who I do it for, and why you should care, right? So making sure that you have not just defined, this is my product and my audience, but the why I care part, and having a really clear brand positioning statement. Most importantly, that position is going to be, if not unique, at least compelling within your marketplace. Are you trying to hold a position that 3 of your competitors already hold? Well, that's difficult and expensive to overcome. If you can find a brand position, this is what I do, who I do it for, and why you should care, that is unique within your competitive set, you got a really good chance at success, and having success without having to spend as much as the others to convince people to take action.
That is beautiful. That is really interesting. Trying to still be on the topic of the startup community a little bit, because we see, I think, a lot of that happening right now, especially right now where people have some time to tinker about their ideas. They always have $1 million ideas, but now with the time for them to start doing or thinking something about it, hopefully. So we also work with range of clients, big, medium, small, smallest. But at least we have one expectations when we talk with an inventor or a startup. And that expectation from our perspective is they have to have involved some amount of resources and time or burden in generating their business model, their business plan. So typically, sometimes the ideas are too amazing. That's good. We like to work with every idea and make it amazing, but we expect them to make sure they invest some of the time in creating their business plan. So something like that from your side, when you might be working with a startup community, do you put out some expectations, or you can literally create anybody's idea into a brand? Is that also possible?
Yeah. I think it's dangerous for me to say we can do it for anyone, but we certainly have the framework, we'll say, and expertise to do it for most, right? Something we're pretty adamant about is making sure that we don't take on engagements from prospective clients who aren't ready to move forward with building a brand. And we've had that in similar instances to what you're describing, where we either have an inventor or an individual or firm who wants to launch a product. And when we get into it, to your point, most often they don't have the business model, meaning the sales channel identification, to really ensure success. So they don't know exactly how it's going to get from, I have this amazing product, to into the person's hands that it fits for. And while we can help consult on that, that's not our core business. And if somebody doesn't have that lined up, we would say that's probably needs to happen before you start investing in developing this amazing story that tells the world who you are and what you do and why they should listen. You should kind of already need to know that if they care about that story, you know how you're going to get the product into their hands.
Yes, that's beautiful. And trying to juxtapose the world of small startups, businesses, let's try to go into the world of established brands, right? Mm-hmm. So if we are working with a big established brand, think of any big brand. Let's say it might be, I don't know, Hyundai or Subaru or Nissan, big brand. This question typically I would ask a designer, a person who will actually sit and sketch out a new design for, let's say, that kind of an automotive company. From your perspective as a brand expert, when literally the pencil is going to touch the paper for him or her to sketch out this beautiful rendering of the next vehicle coming in, what should they think about? Should they think about the product first or the brand first? Because the brand is established, you literally have the brand playbook in front of you. You understand that earlier lineup of, let's say, vehicles, and hopefully they want to do one more vehicle. What should be the dilemma be, or the option be, to think about before you put the first gesture on the paper? Brand or product?
That's a really interesting scenario and way to frame this question. And for full disclosure, I'm not a designer by trade, right? So I've never put pen to paper to under that scenario to design a product. But it's funny, I just had my eye on the chat, and one of our participants nailed one of the two things that I think we should be considering first, and that is, no, you absolutely should be thinking about the customer first, as well as, from my perspective, I would say what the brand stands for and what you're trying to accomplish, right? So I would argue that the product, and in thinking about the product, that's going to be the result of the exercise of thinking about the customer and the brand strategy for that particular product. Our designers are amazing designers who create things that I could never imagine creating myself, right? And what we are always talking about, and what we stress, is that they should not be designing anything without making sure that they have clarity on exactly who it's for and what the objective is. And strangely, we hear that that's not always the case in the design world. That, you know, if we look at very simply design thinking process going with discovery and empathy to strategy and ideation to execution, oftentimes designers are never fully informed or involved or briefed in larger entities on the discovery and strategy piece of the equation. They're done, they're part of a scope, customers get billed for it, but the designer who's actually putting pen to paper hasn't really fully digested those two steps. And in our case, we are adamant that our designers understand completely the discovery and strategy that's been done in front of their pen to paper, and that is the consumer and the objective. So
that makes sense.
The participant who said, shouldn't they think about the customer? Absolutely, yes, I agree. We're on the same page.
Yeah, that makes sense, and there are many questions coming in. I think I will just, some of them, one person says, where can I get the reference to the data on 60-40 split to convince my boss? That's a pretty interesting one. If there is any research paper or something, send that link to me or Lanea, and Lanea can put that in the box, because you're right. If you're standing up for yourself rather than just sell, it really makes sense, and people want to convince their boss.
Feedback to that point, there's we have on our website in the main nav, there's an approach section, which I think Linnea got it pulled up right now. If you click on approach, and then there's a branding versus marketing piece of content. And within that,
this one
on the left there. Yep.
Awesome. So I like it. The answer is right here, ladies and gentlemen. For the question that was asked, you can directly go to skidmorestudio.com. There's another question. It's pretty long, but I think I should read it. It's from Adam. Your examples like Nike and Apple, they have huge budgets to allow them in to invest and are all those things. Can you share a specific example of a smaller businesses who cannot invest at that level in the branding activities, and how can a smaller company using branding to generate the ROI? So any smaller examples the audience would need to hear.
Absolutely. And again, we've certainly worked with the largest companies in the world, Amex and Walmart to Anheuser-Busch, but we work with small Detroit-based startups too. One great example of getting scrappy with like very little investment, but having a customer and brand mindset show success. We work with a small company called Michigan Farm to Freezer, who processes Michigan agriculture products, freezes them, and sells them through grocery retailers. Great story, great company based in Eastern Market. And through rebranding them and getting their messaging clear, they were having some good traction and success, but their owner, who's really sharp and thinks about a customer and brand perspective first, as he's walking through one of his customers' stores, so grocery retail, he thinks to himself, man, if I put myself in my customer's shoes and I'm looking for produce, I'm looking for produce way more often when I'm in the produce section of the store than when I'm in the freezer section looking at frozen pizzas. How do I get my frozen product into the produce section? Because that's not the norm. And then we started talking about, he brought the idea to me, and we thought about a branded experience, and we had to pitch this to the grocery retailer, and thankfully they picked up on it. But he was able to purchase freezer coolers that would fit into unused floor space in different retailers' produce areas that we could wrap with his branded messaging, which Michigan freshest frozen, it's flash frozen right off of the farm, right? Product. And the sales on that product increased like between 400 and 800% in the same stores, because he thought about his customer's mindset when they're looking for a product like his and how to apply his brand in a different way in the retail environment. And there was zero activation marketing cost to it. It was just the cost of the freezer to put into the retailer.
That's pretty interesting. That's a huge number of spike sales for the same store. That's a concrete example right there as such too. There are again many questions, and I want to make sure I do some of them. This is from Michelle. It's like a long question, but maybe you can help her guide a little bit. I'm a second-year-old college industrial design student. Is brand design an umbrella function? Yeah, okay. Do brand designers need to be involved in hands-on elements of illustrations or doing work, or is branding more of just not just a managerial position, kind of an advisory position? So you also do hands-on work or not?
I think the functions in our studio, like I said, we're small and scrappy, but really got really highly talented people. The functions are brand strategist, and a brand strategist is typically not going to be a designer. And then we have copywriters who usually grow into a strategy role, because the idea of formulating words and expressing ideas really lends itself to then having just the right strategic mindset. So our copywriters grow into strategists. And then our designers are a separate skill set function. Tons of overlap in the process in how they think and how they work together. And our designers are highly strategic, and our strategists understand design, but the functional day-to-day work generally is pretty split or delineated between the two. So if somebody's deciding on career path, I would say there's a strategy path and there's a design path. And designers, and actually our executive creative director, Kasha, started his career as a graphic designer and then transitioned into a strategy role, became a digital strategist and then a brand strategist. And now he oversees both functions, both the strategy and the design function at our studio. So highly related. I would just say, if you want to be a designer on the design side, there's just a technical training and skill set that you would need to have the schooling and experience in to function there most likely.
That's interesting. So again, so there are, Michelle, there are many elements that make up a branding studio. You can always try to see what gels with your own perspective. Another question that's pretty interesting from Julia. It might be on the world of ethics. Have you ever worked with a company whose public branding was way different or incongruous with their actual operations? And then how do you tussle between working for such a client?
Yeah, it is. It is a constant assessment, right? And we talk about it openly, transparently. We talk about it with prospects, that we can only tell a story that's true, right? And while it's not always black and white. We live in a world that's gray. So we can talk about aspirational branding and telling a story that is your best self that may not be wholly realized yet. But if you're trying to create a brand around something that's just not true, it won't work. And we've had multiple instances of prospects that have come to us where, and I have one in mind, I certainly won't mention any names, but an entity that had a questionable reputation for what their role as a corporate citizen in the community. So I was, I don't want to take outside PR as my understanding of who somebody is or what they do. So I had very direct conversation with the leadership of that entity. And it was over 2 different conversations to say, basically, I really need to understand as owner of Skidmore Studio and upholding my values and our team's values, if what you're asking for is really helping you with a communication issue, or you have a real operational issue that's causing damage and you're trying to smooth it over. If you have fixed your operational issues and you aren't really causing damage and you're trying to tell that true story now, I may be able to help you do that. If you still have those operational problems, I understand, I'm not judging it. We're just not the right partner to help. And they actually were transparent and honest and said, we're working every day to fix the problem, but it's not fixed yet. And I said, great, then we're not the right partner to help you. But when you do have it fixed, let me know and we might be able to help out.
That's
so
really
that's
good. That's really bold and good of you, Drew. It's difficult to do that decision, especially for a small business as such. But if you are doing that,
GVAC as the sales guy, and we hired a new business development leader last year, and he witnessed 2 of these conversations within his first 60 days. And he's looking at me in the room both times like, this is my job to sell. I've got people at the table and you're telling them we can't work with them. And ultimately, it's just about holding up our values, being able to be our best selves. At the same time, we're helping our clients be their best selves. And again, it's not consensus with my team either. We certainly have worked with clients in the past where certain team members say, I don't think we should be working with them from a value standpoint. But ultimately, it's my decision as the owner to make the decisions that I think are aligned with values. But yeah, to answer the question very directly, we occasionally see prospects or clients that aren't being authentic or where their brand doesn't align, and we choose not to work with them.
That's really good, and more power to you for being that. I know we are almost near the time, but I think this question somehow needs to be addressed. Basically, from a brand perspective, how should organizations, big or small, be handling the uncertainty of what's happening right now with this COVID-19 virus? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's something we've been talking about internally, obviously. And it's really an unprecedented situation for us in our lifetime. And there's certainly been pandemics before, but not at this scale in the U.S. with us. So we put out just the other day some tips for working at home. So you find that on our blog. So that's an important thing, is recognizing that for those of us who are still trying to be productive and helpful to our clients, to our constituents, to all those who are in need, it is different to work at home for most people. So you got to be aware of that. From a branding and marketing perspective, you've got both haven't talked about employer brand at all today, but employer branding is, your communications and your brand internally to your employees and what makes you a great employer. So there's issues there. about how do you handle situations like this as an employer, especially in times of uncertainty, right? Thanks, Linnea. That's our most recent post. And then externally, how do we handle communicating? We're all still trying to stay in business, right? I mean, we're trying to keep our people employed. We're trying to help our customers who need it. And it's a really fine line to walk. So a couple things we've settled on. It's be open, positive, and honest, right? People are scared right now of the unknown, both internally and externally. So make as much information known as possible and continue communicating what you stand for as a company, and make it relevant to today's situation. Please acknowledge reality. I think it's kind of laughable when I'm getting emails right now that are from drip campaigns from whoever it's from that are just don't acknowledge the situation of the world and are trying to sell me a pair of shoes or something. Like, it just feels a little tone deaf. So it's not that you can't be sending messaging out and that it has to be something weird like, hey, you've been on my email list for 3 years, we've never met, but we're here to help you. Like, I don't know if that's really authentic either. So I think really think about what is a genuine way you can help your audience and communicate that openly and honestly. Don't be afraid to acknowledge the situation, embrace acknowledging the situation, and act with care and authenticity. And rather than leaning on sales messaging, lean on messaging that is your way to authentically help the world right now.
That's beautiful. I like that, and almost we're on the time. But before we let you go, Drew, thank you for your time. But just something to wrap, not just the topic about branding, or not about the topic about design or what to do in the coronavirus situation. You are a really good, successful person. You have been through your journey. Do you want to put some nuggets of wisdom out there for our audience that these are a few things that helped you in achieving who you are?
Well, thank you, Jivak. You're very kind. I appreciate that. Some of the things that I stick to that work for me right now, one, slow down, stay calm, and just take deep breaths. When we're feeling a little bit of pressure, just take a deep breath. And be thankful that we have what we have. So not only our company, but myself, gratitude is a really important thing to have and acknowledge right now. So I am waking up every morning and intentionally expressing gratitude before I get my feet out of the bed, whatever it is for that day. Get yourself in a positive mindset before you start the day. And then our team is actually doing every morning, we're calling it homeroom, but a Zoom call with everyone on the team, cameras on, and every individual team member is expressing gratitude for the day and just sharing something. So staying in touch. So the gratitude standpoint, slow down to speed up is something we like to say at the studio. Be thoughtful of what you're doing. And last, I would just say, listen to whatever Jamie has to say because he's a smart dude and I'm excited to hear what he's got.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Thank you, Drew. Feel free to just keep yourself there. If you want to mute your phone or your video, that will be a little bit more appreciated. But if there are any other things, we will send it to you, and you might want to share any other links that you mentioned over there.
Happy to answer any questions offline, and I really appreciate you having me on, Jiva. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you very much.